How many wins for the Lions in 2023? Our friends at FanDuel set the number. We'll give you that today, right here on the show.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, let's do this, everybody. It's a Tuesday edition of Locked On Lions right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Matt Dery with you. It's a Tuesday, April 4th and a Wednesday, April 5th. Thanks for checking us out wherever you get your podcasts. More importantly, thank you for subscribing and watching for free each and every day on the Locked On Lions YouTube channel. Coming up on the show today, FanDuel win totals. Ooh, Vegas and FanDuel of the Detroit Lions with the highest number of wins of any team in the NFC North. We'll run down the entire division, and I'll react to that coming up momentarily on the show today. Also, Lions get a visit from the top defensive player in this draft. Is there somehow, some way this guy drops to 6? We will discuss that coming up momentarily on the show. And Todd McShay's 2-round mock draft came out today from ESPN.com. We got to get to that today right here on Locked On Lions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at Dery Speaks, Dery, my last name, Speaks, on Twitter, at Locked On Lions on Twitter as well. If you're a Facebook person, the Matt Dery Facebook fan page, we post the podcast there every day and also get your comments there. And, of course, like I said before, free, subscribe, watch us on the Locked On Lions YouTube channel. Big day today because I got to see FanDuel's over-unders, win totals for the upcoming season. And I'm excited. The Detroit Lions are picked to win the division. Now, again, these are Vegas odds. This is not Peter King. This is not a poll of general managers at ESPN.com come August or September. It's a betting site. It's FanDuel, the official sports betting partner, by the way, of the Locked On Podcast Network and the NFL and NBA. But want to give you these win totals and kind of discuss it and tell you if I think it's accurate, not accurate. The Detroit Lions last year, we know, won 9 football games. They went from 3 wins in year 1 under the Holmes and Campbell regime to 9 wins last year. Now, according to FanDuel, with the odds that you can bet on right now at FanDuel.com/lockedon, you can bet on your Detroit Lions right now over under 9.5 wins. Over 9.5 wins minus 132. Under 9.5 wins plus 108. The Detroit Lions over under from FanDuel, 9.5 wins. So Vegas and FanDuel saying and thinking that the Lions will win a half a more game than they won a year ago, setting the odds at 9.5. Year 3, if you're a Lions fan, you look at this schedule, and obviously, at the beginning of the year, you think, oh my God, the schedule's going to be murder. And then maybe it's not as hard as you go through the season. Remember last year, we were really concerned about those Jets and Giants games on the road for the Lions, and Detroit won both of those games. The Lions were not concerned, and we were not concerned as fans or as hosts like me with the Carolina game. Oh, Carolina stinks. They're horrible. It's Baker Mayfield. Turned out it was Sam Darnold late in the year, and the Lions went into Charlotte and got their clocks cleaned. 9.5 wins to me. If I'm betting right now and gun to my head or whatever, I would take the over. I think the Lions should win 10 games this year. I think the Lions in this division with this schedule and everything else should have some success. The schedule's not cake per se. I don't think it's that difficult, although the AFC West and playing some of those teams, including having to play Kansas City, and we don't know yet if that game's going to be played overseas or not. Whatever it is, actually the game's not going to be played overseas. What am I talking about? But regardless, you look at the schedule and you say, with this talent, with these guys back, with all these coaches coming back, the draft's coming up, I would hope that the Lions would finish 10-7 at worst this coming year and improve off of the 9-8 season they had last year when the roster wasn't even as good. Right? I mean, a year ago, you looked at the division, you went, wow, Minnesota ran away with the division, clinched it very early. Are the Vikings as good this year? No. Last year you went, oh man, Lions still have to face Aaron Rodgers twice. Well, the Lions beat him twice. Now an inferior quarterback is allegedly going to be there in Jordan Love. The Bears, while they'll be better, still have a ways to go. And I know the Lions swept them last year, but it was a road game in Chicago, kind of propelled them to new heights a year ago, but that was not an easy game. And it was a game they had to come from behind and win. Of course, the Okuda pick six and everything else. So 9.5 wins, I would take the over there. I think that's, though, a pretty accurate number. Next up from FanDuel in the division, the Minnesota Vikings, over 8.5 wins, under 8.5 wins. So over-under for the Vikings is at 8.5 wins, a win, or one full win, one full loss, whatever it is. One full game behind the Lions. One full win behind the Lions at 8.5. Again, Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, Kirk Cousins, TJ Hawkinson. It's a good offense. You got to figure the Vikings will do some more work to improve the offensive and defensive lines after guys have left. They got to get a middle linebacker now. Kendrick's gone. The Vikings have had some attrition. They've had to cut costs. They've had to slash for salary cap reasons. And 1 year ago, Kevin O'Connell did a nice job. Vikings made the playoffs. But the Lions led the Vikings in the two games that they played for like 119 of the 120 minutes. And Minnesota won a lot of close games. They got a lot of luck. And I don't think that's going to continue again this year. They still have a good football team. I think O'Connell's a good coach. If they bring Cousins back and bring that band back one more time on that offense, they'll win their share of games. 8.5, about right when you're talking about odds for in the division in the Minnesota Vikings. Green Bay Packers, over-under is 7.5 wins. Minus 104 for the over, minus 118 for the under. This is a weird situation to me. I want to see what the Packers do in the draft. Free agency, they've done nothing. It's because they don't know how much money they have left to spend or whatever without the Aaron Rodgers situation being cleared up. All's quiet up there in Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin, until they make the Rodgers deal. I think they'll make the deal before the draft. They'll get some draft capital from the Jets. They still have Jair Alexander, who's as good a corner as there is in the league. They still have Campbell at linebacker. They've got some good players. All right, and I think Jordan Love won't suck, but major questions at wide receiver, some questions along the offensive line, and I think Green Bay being the over-under at 7.5 is about right. Remember last year, the Lions kept them out of the playoffs. The Lions would have lost that game. Green Bay would have gone. And finally, in the division, the Chicago Bears. This is outrageous. 7.5. Minus 122 if you bet the over. Plus 100 if you bet the under. 7.5 wins for the Bears. The Bears stink. I know they spent boatloads of money on free agent linebackers. I'm well aware that Justin Fields now has some weapons to throw to. They also have a bevy of draft picks. They've got DJ Moore now. People like what the Bears have done. Lost David Montgomery. I still think they need help along the offensive and defensive lines in a big way. And I'm not sold that their secondary is that good. 7.5? The Bears won what? 2 football games last year? 3? They're terrible. So I think 7.5 is high for Chicago. But people think Fields takes that next step. Hall of Fields takes that next step this year and elevates them to 7.5 wins. I don't see it. I would take the under there. We got to talk about Will Anderson. We got to do a Todd McShay mock draft. We will do that coming up next. First, though, we got to tell you about our friends at Built Bar. I just ordered a box of the Snickerdoodle Built Puffs, and I can't wait to try them. Built Bars are the best. If you're looking for a delicious treat, don't want all the fat and calories, and you got to try a Built Bar. We just got some, like I said, the other night. I'm excited to try them. You got to try them. Healthy is actually tasty with Built Bar. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't think that they're good for you. All right, what makes them so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. Whether it's the Puffs, the Marshmallow Treats, or the Built Bars, they are fantastic. Go to Built.com right now, put in the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. I just did that as well. Plus, I signed up years ago. I get my points, the whole thing at Built.com. Also, head to your nearest Walmart today or Sam's Club. Run into Sam's Club, if you remember, and grab that 13-bar box with the hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. I also got a box of the Crave bars recently. Oh, yeah. Peanuts and caramel. You can't beat it. Looking for that healthy snack. You hate some of the normal bars, Cliff bars, and the other garbage. Forget it. Get yourself a Built Bar right now. All right, folks. So Aaron Wilson reporting today that Will Anderson, arguably the best player, defensive player in this upcoming draft, 3 years at Alabama, put up monster numbers, was visiting the Lions this week. Today, to be exact. They're supposed to be talking to Jalen Carter as well. They get 30 visits. Will Anderson was an absolute stud as a linebacker, hybrid, edge, anything you wanted at Alabama. For the 3 years that he was there, he was a dominant football player. Will Anderson had, I wrote this down, 204 tackles in his 3 years at Alabama, 34 and a half sacks. And he won the Nagurski Award, not once, but twice, for best defensive player in all of college football. Alabama just churns out pros. They play the best schedule. Nick Saban is greatest college coach of all time. And Will Anderson is exactly what the Lions need on that defense. Defense got better as the season wore on. We love what we're getting from Aiden Hutchinson. Certainly, a guy like James Houston coming off the edge. The secondary now is stacked and loaded with the additions of Sutton and Mosley and Johnson. You bring Tracy Walker back. Kirby Joseph was an awesome surprise as a rookie contributor last year. They love Alex Anzalone at linebacker, but what about a hybrid edge, just beast that can run all over the field, go sideline to sideline, and get to the quarterback? That's exactly what Will Anderson is. He puts fear in the opposing team's offense. Now, the question is the Lions are going to talk to him, is there somehow, some way that two things happen for the Lions? Number one, just like we had Brad Spielberger on from PFF yesterday, the Lions move up to number 3 to get Will Anderson. They would have to move up to get him. Now, do 5 quarterbacks get drafted, and the Lions are sitting pretty at number 6 and have the ability to draft Will Anderson and get him at number 6? Now you're going to say, well, how could 5 quarterbacks be drafted? Well, we just saw Mike Tannenbaum the other day from ESPN say he thinks Hendon Hooker could be a top 5 guy. What if someone else moves up to number 3, like a Tennessee with Arizona, makes a trade and gets Anthony Richardson at 3? And already Bryce Young is off the board. CJ Stroud is off the board. Then Richardson goes. You know the Colts at 4 are taking a quarterback. And Will Levis, we know the history in Indianapolis. They love the great white hope at quarterback. Then at number 5, what if Seattle drafts and stashes Hendon Hooker? I don't see it happening. I think Seattle would be stupid to pass on Will Anderson, but you never know with John Schneider and Pete Carroll, who in the past have made pretty ballsy picks at times when they've drafted. Remember Malik McDowell many years ago. So could Will Anderson drop to 6? I mean, I don't see a way it's happening, but man, would that just be incredible for this football team to be able to have that drop and fall right into your lap. He's a special player. And to me, I know people have talked about maybe Jalen Carter being the best defensive player in this draft and biggest upside. Now, to me, Will Anderson just does it all. Great ball skills in covering tight ends and running backs out of the backfield, can get to the passer, can stop the run. And he brings that kind of Micah Parsons element. I don't know if he's going to be as good as Micah. Micah Parsons is pretty darn good, although his Twitter game ripping on Detroit isn't great, but Will Anderson is pretty darn special. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Where does Todd McShay have the Lions going at 6 and 18 and also in the second round? We will tell you that coming up next here on Locked On Lions. All right, so today, mock draft 2-round edition from ESPN's Todd McShay. As far as the Lions are concerned, McShay has them at number 6, taking Tyree Wilson, the edge from Texas Tech. Quote from McShay, "This pick has to be defense. Detroit was miserable in that department last season, and it was the reason it came up short in the playoff hunt. The Lions were bottom 3 in yards allowed per rush, yards allowed per pass attempt, opponent QBR, and third down defense. Adding Wilson to a young edge rushing contingent that already includes Aiden Hutchinson and James Houston could create real conflict for opponent pass protectors, though. He had 7 sacks in 2022 for a second straight year, and his arm length and pure power jump out on tape. I also considered the secondary with a handful of top-tier cornerbacks on the board, but the Lions have been aggressive there by signing Sutton, Mosley, and Johnson in free agency. Troy is back in the clock at number 18 and has a pair of second-rounders." What's interesting was Jalen Carter in this mock draft was already off the board and went at number 5. Tyree Wilson is interesting. What worries me about Wilson here is the injury history and the fact that he's still not 100%. Jeff Risdon from the Lions Wire has said that with the two Okwaras, Charles Harris, James Houston, Aiden Hutchinson coming back, John Kaminsky coming back, Josh Paschal, the ability to play inside and outside, he doesn't see the Lions taking an edge rusher in this draft early. But Tyree Wilson's a pretty safe pick at number 6. At number 18, McShay has the Lions selecting, that's right, running back Bijan Robinson out of Texas. McShay writes, quote, "Fans will question just about any landing spot for Robinson because of his position, but consider how heavily the Lions lean on the run and what Robinson can do for an offense. We're talking about a top 5 talent in this class who can break free with burst through the hole, makes defenders miss with his strength, and haul in passes with his reliable hands. Jamal Williams has gone to New Orleans, and DeAndre Swift has struggled to stay healthy and is entering his final year of his contract. Yes, Detroit signed David Montgomery, but he has rushed for 100-plus yards just 3 times over the past 2 seasons. Robinson only had 3 games under 100 yards rushing last year." Other options for Detroit include tight end or continuing down the defensive rebuild path, but with 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, it can afford to make this luxury selection and fill some holes down the road, end quote. I'm taking Michael Mayer here over Bijan Robinson. I don't know. I know it's DeAndre Swift's probably last year in Detroit. I get that David Montgomery isn't Barry Sanders, but am I going running back at 18 when I've got other holes? I could get an offensive lineman for depth. I could get a tight end. I maybe could add another corner at 18 after taking Wilson. I don't know. I like Bijan Robinson, don't get me wrong. I just don't love that pick there. And when's he going to play this year? You got Craig Reynolds. Come on, Craig. You got DeAndre Swift coming back on a contract year. You want him to play. And you got David Montgomery. When's Robinson going to play? Sit on the bench for a top 20 pick? Second round, McShay at number 48 in the second round has the Lions selecting Jack Campbell, linebacker from Iowa. Quote, "Campbell posted more than 120 tackles in each of the past 2 seasons, and he'd compete for snaps with Alex Anzalone and Malcolm Rodriguez in the middle of this defense undergoing a big overhaul." End quote. Jack Campbell's a good football player, but the Lions are only going to have 2 linebackers on the field at once. They love Rodrigo. They want to see more from Derek Barnes. And again, they've got Anzalone coming back. They gave him a 3-year deal. So it would be an upgrade for the Lions to get Jack Campbell, but I don't know if I see Brad Holmes taking a inside linebacker in the second round. At number 55 in the second round, 7 picks later, McShay has the Lions taking Sam Laporta, the tight end from Iowa. Quote, "Laporta makes it 6 tight ends in the first 2 rounds, which would tie the common draft era record set in 1974. But this class is that good. Laporta was consistent at Iowa, catching 153 passes over 4 seasons for 1,786 yards and 5 scores. He has speed down the seam and tempos his routes effectively. Laporta could step in for TJ Hawkinson, who was traded to Minnesota at the deadline last season. End quote. Another tight end from Iowa certainly would not be something that I think fans would love. Lions have already met with Sam Laporta. They met him with him in the combine. They were at Luke Schoonmaker's pro day. You got to think Michael Mayer from Notre Dame is going to be, as part of the equation as well. I wouldn't be bugged by taking a tight end that can make some plays and can block at number 55. I would not be opposed to that pick. What's weird about it is you take 2 players from Iowa in the span of 7 picks at 48 and 55. I do think the Lions, with 4 picks in the top 55, do need to take a tight end with one of those picks. So that pick would not bother me. Mayer, to me, is the best guy, though. He is. All right, there's your Tuesday episode edition of Locked On Lions. Again, thanks for checking us out on Locked On Lions YouTube, which is free. Please subscribe so you get it each and every day.